there, this is Jen from DaJen Eats, home of the Ari Happy Vegan. I'm really glad that you guys could join me for another one of our cooking tutorials. Before we get things started today, I really wanted to thank you for hanging out with me, for hanging with me in the previous videos, and for offering such really good and positive feedback. One of the feedbacks that I got was from my friend Michelle Beatty, who runs careertipper.com. She said perhaps I should use a lipstick to make my face pop a little bit. So I'm lipsticking it today for you, Michelle. See? Guys, for great career tips and confidence boosters, visit careertipper.com. Say hi to Michelle and tell her Jen from DaJen Eats sent you. Another one of my friends pointed out that perhaps I should explain, the concept of vegan food and what Ari means, because you guys might not be familiar with either Ari or vegan, and I'll do that really quickly. Vegan cooking for me is a way of being in alignment with the compassion that I feel. It is important for me to treat human and non-human animals fairly, and a part of treating people and animals fairly is not exploiting them, not eating them, not using them for food or entertainment or clothing or anything like that. And that attitude needs to be reflected in my food. And that is why I choose to cook vegan food. Now, Ari now is really simple. That's a Jamaican way of life. It's really an expression of contentment and happiness and peace. It's kind of the yeah man, everything good kind of attitude, everything Ari. So again, I welcome you to DaJen Eats, home of the Ari Happy Vegan. We're good? Okay, so today we're going to cook a Jamaican staple, Bammy. For those of you who are not familiar with Bammy, Bammy is a starch in Jamaica. It's made from ground cassava that's dried and then put into a pan to be formed. In order for it to be cooked, it really needs to be reconstituted. So it's either soaked in water or milk. In many times I would use non-dairy milk, but in this instance we're going to use water, and I'll explain to you why. For those of you guys who may not have Bammy, you can cook along with today's video using tofu instead. And I'll explain to you what the key differences are and what the key applications would be so that you could make a successful dish very similar to this at home. Now, the challenge with Bammy is that in Jamaica it's typically referred to or regarded as a side dish. It's something that accompanies meat or a main dish. So you'll have Bammy and the meat or Bammy and fish, but Bammy is never really regarded as the star. And today we're gonna make the humble Bammy the star of today's dish. How about that? And that is one of the unique aspects, I have to say, about veganism. Because we don't use meat, we are challenged to reimagine the dinner plate. Because especially in Western civilization, we are so cultured to think that on the plate the star or the main ingredient is the meat or the protein, and then you'll have the side ingredients of maybe a starch or a vegetable. Now if you take away the meat, a lot of people first think that, okay, well then you're going to have a plate of just side dishes. And that's not necessarily so. It gives something else an opportunity to step up and be the star. We just have to use our imagination a little bit, darlings. What is it that they said in what's that show? Inception. You gotta dream bigger, darlings. You gotta dream bigger. So we're gonna use our Bammy today and make it the star, and it's going to be a ginger and a thyme infused Bammy, and we're gonna serve that with mashed potatoes. I'm not gonna show you how to make the mashed potatoes. If you are not comfortable making that, send me an email. I'll give you step-by-step directions so you can get the perfect mashed potatoes at home. But for today, we're just going to focus on the Bammy. Traditionally, this is how the Bammy appears. Now, I have a very specific plating in mind. And this is something that you want to consider when you're cooking. You want to envision how you're going to put it on the plate first, right? and then work your way backwards. So I want these to be in little squares. As you can tell that this is round. So all I'm simply going to do, darlings, is form a square by cutting off the edges of it. It is very dry and very dense. So you just keep cutting through it. And these little bits I'm not going to use in the dish today, but I can save them for when I'm making the stew. You don't want to throw it away really, because you don't want to waste food. Okay. It is not a perfect square, but it's close. We'll go with that. We're going to use 2 Bammys today. We want to practice knife safety, guys, because this is a very dense item to work with. So you want to make sure that in whatever way that you're cutting, if you were to slip, that you won't have an accident. So you put your hand on the top of the knife and work your way down. So if it slips one way or the other, you won't end up cutting yourself. Make sense? So now we have a square, or square-ish. Okay. That looks a little bit more square. So we're going to break each of these squares into 4 squares. So we half that, and then we half it again. And this is pretty much how I'm going to want to present it on the plate. Keep going. Perfect. Now we are going to marinate this in sugar and thyme and ginger. The way it is, because it is so dry and it is so dense, we have very little hope of the marinade actually penetrating through. And I think perhaps it's one of the reasons Bammy is traditionally cooked the way it's done. It's usually either steamed or soaked in water and then fried, because there is not a lot of opportunity to get flavor infused into it. But what we're going to do is reconstitute the Bammy, immerse it in water, let it soak for about half an hour, so that the fibers inside will not be as dense and the flavor of our marinade can penetrate. All right. That's good. This is about 4 cups of water. And we're just going to let this sit for half an hour to soften up the Bammy a little bit. Before we leave, I'm going to talk to you about tofu, if you were to use tofu instead of this. Because Bammy is such a Jamaican staple, if you're not around Jamaicans or around, you know, supermarkets that service Jamaicans, you may not find it. So you can substitute tofu. Now for those who are not familiar with tofu, we might conjure up some crazy stories of this gelatinous looking squishy thing, but there is no mystery to tofu. It really is just coagulated soy milk. It literally is soy milk with a coagulant, and it's pressed into a form, and typically it is kept in liquid. Now the tofu, unlike the Bammy, has a lot of liquid in it. And the thing about flavor is not an infinite commodity. Like a piece of food will only absorb so much flavor, and then there literally is no more room for it. So if the tofu has so much water in it, then it doesn't give enough space for all that flavor to be infused. So we're going to do the exact opposite of the Bammy. The Bammy we immerse in water, but guys, if you're using tofu, you want to make sure that you put it in a press and you squeeze out a lot of that water before you start marinating it. That will greatly improve the texture of the tofu, and it will give you a chance to infuse as much flavor. If you do not have a tofu press, you simply take your block of tofu, you wrap it in paper towels, you put it on a plate, put another plate on top of that, and then put something really, really heavy, like a really heavy skillet or a heavy canned item, a giant can of tomato sauce or something, and let that press for 15 to 20 minutes, and most of the liquid will seep through. So we're gonna let our bammy soak, and I'm assuming if you're cooking along with me, we're gonna let the tofu really get pressed out, and we will see you guys in about half an hour, and our bammy has had a chance to get some water soaked into it so it will more easily accept the marinade. And we're gonna do a marinade today of ginger and thyme. Those will be our primary seasoning and spices, and we're gonna put it in a base of coconut oil. That will be our fat, and apple cider vinegar, our acid. I said that because I want you guys to know that a marinade is a liquid that food is soaked in, usually with the purpose of having the food penetrate the flavor of the marinade. The marinade basically has three components. It has a fat, it has an acid, and it has seasonings and spices. You can have marinades where you would use just the acid and the seasoning. This is the item that you are marinating already has its own fat, or you can use a marinade where it's just fat and seasoning, where you don't want the acidic flavor profile. But the bammy has no fat in it, and we do want an acidic profile because it gives a depth of flavor. So we're going to use all three components today. Guys, that you want to remember about doing a marinade is that you normally use 2 to 3 times as much fat as you do acid. That's a good ratio to go with, and whether you use 2 or 3 is determined by the flavor profile that you are seeking. And let's get started. The first thing you want to do is add salt and pepper to the bammy. It can be difficult sometimes to determine just how much salt to add to a marinade, but I've found that it's much easier to go ahead and salt the surface of whatever it is that you wish to marinate, so you have the salt out of the way. Okay, good. Good, I want to make sure it sticks a little. Okay, very good. We're going to put this out of the way. Actually, we'll just put it aside right here. And we start the ingredients for a marinade. The first thing that we're going to add, of course, is our fat. And the fat today that we're using, we're doing 1/3 of a cup of coconut oil. Coconut oil, unless it's raw, is a very neutral flavored oil. If you get the raw coconut oil, then you're going to get the coconut flavor to it, which is something I do not want. But the processed coconut oil, the pressed coconut oil, actually will have a neutral flavor, and we'll use that. You can also use olive oil or any oil of your choice. And to that, we're going to add our acid. The acid we're using is in the form of vinegar. You can also use citrus. Lemon juice is a good acid to add. We're going to add 3 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. All right, and let's give that a whisk. Okay, good. We want to set that aside and start to get our spices and seasonings together. We're going to add to that some ginger that we're going to grate into the mixture that we have so far. When you grate it gets a lot finer very quickly. Okay, that is good. That's lovely. We want to add to that 2 cloves of garlic, and I'll show you a trick on how to get the garlic out of the skin. I normally cut the top off and smash it with the knife turning away from me. The blade of the knife should not be facing me, and smash. And that way the garlic will very quickly come apart from the skin. Repeat. Okay. And we want to get the garlic as fine as possible. So we're gonna cut it up as fine as we can. I want you to watch carefully to see what I'm doing. Always making sure that your fingers are out of the way. I'm using a very, very sharp paring knife, which is the best thing to use to cut the garlic because it's sharp and precise. And the truth is, guys, less accidents happen with sharp knives than dull knives, simply because when the knife is dull, it slides all over the place. It has no grip. And so that's how you end up cutting yourself. So you want to make sure that your knives are good and sharp, and that will help you to exercise safe practices in the kitchen. If you notice, wherever I'm cutting, my fingers are out of the way. All right. That's fine, but I think we want to go finer. Primarily because we're not going to be cooking this garlic for a lengthy time. So I want to make it as fine as possible. This cut, if you can see, guys, is called the pivot cut. And it's basically where you hold the knife up onto the blade like this, and you put your hand towards the tip, and you hold the tip down, and you're pivoting the knife around the cut. Does that make sense? So this is called the pivoting technique. You also want to make sure you smush your garlic, because garlic really doesn't break down in cooking, and it can be a very assertive and unpleasant flavor if not properly cooked down. So we're going to help it to break down as much as possible simply by smushing it. We continue chopping. That is perfect. We add that to our marinade. We are also going to add 3 sprigs of thyme. It's easy, guys, to get the leaves of the thyme off the sprig or the stalk simply by holding the tip like this and sliding down. How easy is that? We hold the tip and we slide down. There you go. Just want to give this a rough chop. And now we go ahead and add this to the marinade. Okay, there are only a couple more things that I add to this. And because I want it to have sort of a sweet and tangy flavor, I'm going to add to that 3 tablespoons of cane sugar. You can add brown sugar if you do not have cane sugar. And finally, for a little bit of heat, I'm going to add a tablespoon of sambal olek. Sambal olek is an Asian chili paste. If you do not have sambal olek, you can just, add chilies. Or a bit of hot pepper sauce. That will do just fine. And now we just want to add the bammy to the marinade and swirl it around. Good, isn't that beautiful? Yes. Okay. Toss it around and make sure everything has a coat. Okay. And guys, we're just gonna let this sit for another half an hour, and then we'll get ready to pan fry it and we'll be done. I'll see you soon. Okay, my darlings, it has been 30 minutes and the bammy has marinated really well. As you can probably see, a bit of the starch has leached into the marinade. That's the starch from the bammy, and that's fantastic because it will make the marinade even thicker since we're going to cook with it. And what we're going to do with the bammy really is pan fry. It's going to be a dry heat method of cooking, and normally you would heat the pan first and then add the oil, but because the bammy has been soaked in oil, We're just not gonna bother with the oil at all. We're gonna put the bammy in. The oil that's on it should cook it nicely. You wanna hear that sizzle. Good. You wanna make sure you put as little of the spices in as possible so that that doesn't burn. Towards the end, when we would have reduced the heat, we'll go back and add those. Here we go. And we're really just gonna let these stay on one side until it's ready to be turned. Because what we want is for the browning effect to occur. And once it is ready, the pan will release the bammy. If it's not quite brown on one side and you try to remove it, it'll be a little bit sticky and a little difficult to lift. So we give it a couple minutes on one side and then we check back in and try to turn it. Okay guys, it has been a couple of minutes and the bammy is now ready to be turned to the other side. And really what we're looking for is sear on one side. That's beautiful. Gently lift. Very good. Isn't that beautiful? The ones, if you'll notice, the ones on the edges won't come up as easily. That's because they're not quite ready yet. Like I said, the pan and the bammy will let you know when it's ready to be flipped. It will release easily like that. Everybody's ready and beautiful. At this point, you want to reduce your heat and add the rest of the marinade. That is beautiful. You want to give the garlic in particular a couple of minutes to really cook down so that when it's done, it will not be raw. We want to add a bit of salt, just a sprinkle of salt and pepper. And add some tomatoes. What I have here are some cherry tomatoes, and you want to put these cut side down so that some of the juices, when it's softening, will seep into the sauce. Beautiful. Just give each of these a minute or so. We've given these tomatoes a minute to have their juiciness added to the sauce, and now we're gonna cook the sauce down a little bit by adding some water to it. Just about a cupful or so. And gently shake the pan around. Good. To help release the bammy. Very good. We're gonna raise the heat again to about medium-high and give this another minute for the water and the marinade to reduce into a really lovely sauce. Darlings, it has been a couple of minutes, and as you can tell, the sauce is nice and syrupy, which is exactly what we want to happen. Okay, we're gonna turn off our heat completely, but we're gonna leave the pan on the heat, and to that now we're going to add a teaspoon of cold non-dairy butter. Now this is what we're going to use to really finish the salt and give it a nice silky texture. The butter will form a bit of a liaison and will bring everything together so it will be creamy and smooth. Finish with a bit of fresh herbs. Here I'm using parsley. I don't think there's anything in the world more beautiful than this. Oh, how amazing is that? Take a look, darlings. Isn't it beautiful? And that's the thing when we're cooking vegan foods, we have to reimagine the plates. Things that we would normally put aside as side dishes, We can add different flavors, use different cooking techniques, and really make them the star. Guys, this is my brown sugar, ginger, and thyme bammy served with mashed potatoes. I hope you enjoy it. Please be sure to visit my website, DaJeneats.com, for more tips and tricks. Let's cook together.